Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. Okay, welcome to the show, everyone. And before I tell you about the episode, I want to tell you about the Art Ed Now Winter 2027 conference. And I know it seems early to talk about it, but we have our super early bird pricing happening right now. And that is the lowest price that the conference will ever be. Okay, it runs through the end of August. So if you are wanting to come to the conference, jump on this deal right now. As always, the winter conference is going to be full of art making and games and prizes and giveaways and an amazing few days of professional development. You can find out everything you need at theartofeducation.edu/now. The price right now is as low as you will be able to find it, and the super early bird special runs through the end of August. Now, as for the episode today, my guest is going to be Jenn Russell. Been a little while since Jen's been on the podcast, but I always love talking to her. We're going to be diving into one of our favorite topics, art history. And more specifically, we're going to share some opinions about the artists that we think maybe get a little bit too much hype, and a little bit about the artists that we think deserve a little more attention. And before we get to those lists, we're going to talk a little bit about art history, why we have so much fun with it, why it's so engaging in the first place. Jenn really loves to think about art history as a big movie, and I love telling about it as a really long story, but she loves to dive into the connections and the drama and the influence and the plot twists and all of those things that can go along with the stories that we tell our students and how we hook them in to really engage them with art history. So we'll talk about stories about artists that can help kids connect like that. How we can share some of our own opinions and our own preferences, but still leave kids to have room to develop opinions of their own. In the meantime, though, I am excited to talk to Jenn, so let me go ahead and bring her on now. All right, Jenn Russell is joining me. Jenn, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
I know it's been a while since we've talked, so I'm really glad to have you on the podcast. I know you're busy. I know it's the start of school and things are hectic, but I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you being willing to talk about art history with me. So we have an exciting list coming up with our most overrated and our most underrated artists. But before we get to that, I would just love to talk in general about art history, about teaching art history. So for you, what are your favorite parts of art history? What excites you when it comes to just art history in general? What excites you about teaching it to your kids?
I think to me, the most exciting part is watching the connections. And so I try to teach art history as if it was just like a big, long movie, which is normally how I approach
Love
history
it.
in general. And
Yes.
art history feels like a little bit more of like a exciting movie. There's like salacious parts, right? There's like drama, there's like all sorts, like gasp, murder, like hashtag
Right.
Caravaggio, right? So like we have so much goodness and just like juicy bits to it that it really excites my students, and then they make the connections of, oh my gosh, that's where I've seen that, or that's how it happened, and like the behind the scenes of it all really keeps them entertained and into like tuned in. So I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because, I was just thinking about it. I love the story of art history, how, artists respond to other artists and then the next generation responds back to them by going back even further. And there's all of this interplay. And then if you
Yes.
can, you know, intersperse that with the salaciousness, as you said, of all of these, great side stories about, car crashes and drama and murder and
Yes.
relationships. And there's all of these other things that serve as great hooks and really does a lot to help us tell those stories.
Yes, I love it.
And, like, so the paintings themselves are sometimes exciting. The sculptures are sometimes exciting. But if you need that extra hook, then those extracurricular stories are sometimes what's going to do it for you. So,
Oh, for sure.
and then the other question I was thinking about before we get into our list of overrated and underrated artists, the things that we like personally versus the things we need to teach. And
Right.
so I wanted to ask you, like, is it different for you, or is there a separation for you between what you like and what you share with your students? And I guess second part of that, like, are there artists that you maybe don't want to teach or don't like to teach, but you feel like you have to? You feel like they're an important enough part of the curriculum or just the story of art history that you feel like you have to cover them in your class?
Yes. I mean, I think I've said if you have ever been a part of, seen my face slash voice in these here parts of the art of ed radio or any sort of other thing. I am an honest person, and my students really appreciate that. So anytime, especially when teaching art history, there I'm 100% transparent. And my kids kind of roast me about it. They're just like, "You have 75 favorites. Like, not everyone can be your favorite." I'm like, "First of all, this is my classroom. I make the rules. Yes, I can." And then second, why can't everyone? Why can't everybody be my favorite? Not everyone is my favorite. And then I am very honest when I'm just like, ugh, I don't know that I vibe with this. However, I can
Mhm.
recognize that it is an important foundation to what we know as art. And so like I really find mannerism to be the most yikes. Like, what are we
Oh,
doing? What are we
fair.
doing here? Right? But I say that and then I'm like, I don't want to sway your opinion. You could like these very green tones if you if that's your vibe. Like that's awesome and making people look a little sickly and dead. You can like that. And I do have kids that are like, "I don't know, I kind of like the the non-matching color scheme," and I'm like, "Okay, well, now I know who you are." But I just make it purposeful and it incites a conversation because then they get to be honest and they get to build their own opinion without me necessarily swaying it. Like, we all agree that art history is important. It's integral, I
Mhm.
think, to like, everybody should take it, in my opinion. And when they do take it, I get messages all the time and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like I saw this and oh my, this reminded me of this. And so I had to tell you." But it's just because we had some really honest conversations about what I liked and what I didn't like. And
Yeah,
it
yeah,
invited them to also form and evaluate, really evaluate the art, evaluate the artist, and then form their own opinions. So I kind of wrap it all in the same thing. Like, I know I have to teach this. This is not my favorite.
right.
But, in the same vein, this is my favorite, and here's why, right? Like, instead of this, we could have looked at this, right? And so it's an opportunity for me to add more to their, repertoire.
No, I think that's a good way of putting it, and I think there is a balance there as far as, what you show, how you approach it. Like, for example, I hate minimalism. I think it's the
It's the
worst,
worst.
like, hey, this guy's laying some bricks in a line and calling it a sculpture. And that's fine, but I don't teach it like that,
Right,
and I'm happy to tell kids this is not my favorite because of these reasons, but I would love for you to form your own opinion of that. And I'd like to leave things open ended enough that they can approach it with an open mind and they can form their own opinions. Like you said, there are a lot of connections that get made and a lot of ways to do that. And so there's not anybody I ever want to take out of the curriculum or not teach just because of my personal likes or dislikes.
right.
But I think it is important to kind of make sure that everybody who's part of that story gets in front of the kids and we share that with them. So
Agreed.
That being said, I did ask you to come up with a list of 3 artists that you think are really overrated, and also 3 artists that you think are a little bit underrated that people need to know more about. So, since I am in my personal life a tier 1 hater, I would love to go with the overrated artists
Yes.
first, if you don't
Yes.
mind. So, would you like me to go first, or would you like to tell me
You can go
yours?
first because I think we share one. So we
Okay,
should
okay.
dive.
The first artist that I put as the most overrated, for me, it's Jeff
Agreed.
Koons. So is he the one that we
Yes.
shared?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it I
Ugh,
thought it might be.
yes.
So, so tell me why do you dislike Jeff Koons so much?
Well, in the year of my Lord and Savior Beyoncé, Giselle, um, it's really difficult to to teach Jeff Koons, right? Let me for context, friends, um, my campus is a one per campus, so all of my students have devices, and immediately we're
Mhm.
like split screen, and notes are on one side of the screen, and then we take notes on the or we Google on the other, right? They're just so locked in and in tune, and so when we get to the part of the 250 where it's like Jeff Koons and we have to talk about like Pink Panther and then, and uh, it's first of all, yes, there's kitsch and I am a maximalist and I love kitsch. However,
Right.
um, explaining why we have Jane Mansfield and the Pink Panther and the proportions and his thoughts, it's not it's not sound enough for them not to get it, for them not to go deep dive and explore, and then when they explore a little too much, he's just a suspicious character.
Yeah, I was gonna say it brings up some uncomfortable
Right.
conversations with his behavior that we maybe don't wanna have in the art
Correct,
room.
and then, his name appears in places, and then you have to address that. A lot of Pandora's box that could potentially be open with the mention, right? And I think maybe
Yep.
perhaps we wouldn't necessarily be in that boat if the piece wasn't the Pink Panther piece as far as the AP Art History curriculum. If we had done a balloon dog,
Right.
I think we could get away with it. I mean, again, still suspicious character. That's not gonna change my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very visceral to look at a bombshell sculpture that is so large. So
Right.
large,
Right.
for what that is, and so it's really just tough and yuck to dive into.
Yeah, I think yuck is the
Yes.
right word. But I don't know, like, I've never been impressed by his piece. Like, "This is shiny" is not an aesthetic to me, and, like,
Yes.
just the simplicity, the kitsch, just I
Right.
don't vibe with that, and I have a really tough time of telling kids, "This is why he's important, this is why people love his stuff," and it just doesn't make sense to them, so,
Yes.
yeah, I think gets way more recognition than he needs or deserves, I would say, so, okay, number 2 on my list was Damien Hirst. So, for those unfamiliar, Damien Hirst is very good at just putting animals into formaldehyde, a weird bluish green liquid, putting it in a box and saying, "This is my sculpture." And, I think at one time that was probably young and hip and cutting edge, but I've always just been very meh with it, very indifferent to his stuff. Like, you're trying to shock me. It's not working for me. I don't know why people love it so much. Quick caveat, he did make that skull made out of diamonds,
I was
and I
gonna
will
say
say that is awesome. I
that was
love
my
that
introduction,
piece.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, obsessed." And, yeah, you mentioned that shiny is,
Yeah.
like, not an aesthetic. It's, like, not an aesthetic. It's part of my personal like, if I could just walk around in glitter, I would. But that was my introduction to Damien Hirst, and then going back, I was like,
And then you're
Yeah, I
like,
was like,
"Oh, here's
I
a
don't know that I like
zebra.
the back
Here's a
catalog.
shark."
I
Yeah,
was like I was like, "This
yeah,
skull
fair,
is
fair.
about as cool as we can get."
I was gonna say, we could maybe just set the skull aside, be like, great work on that piece," and then the rest of it,
Yes.
we don't need to worry about. So, who
Okay,
was number 2 on
you
your
mentioned
list?
being a top tier hater. I personally am a Division 1 hater. And as captain of the hater team, as I have dubbed myself sometimes in class, unpopular opinion time, perhaps. Rothko?
I'm ready.
Okay, listen.
Mm.
I also have to give you a little bit of context. I am a Houston girl, okay? Grew up in Houston, was born and raised in Houston.
Yeah,
Rothko
yeah,
Chapel at the Houston Museum of Art. I could not wrap my brain around it. First of all, I understand why teachers don't like to take field trips because I was a rowdy 17-year-old child, was like, "What are we doing in here?"
fair.
And I said that, I think maybe perhaps in that volume, and you're supposed to be very reverent in the Rothko Chapel, which my teacher did, in
Right.
fact, she did explain it to us. But then you're faced with color
Okay,
story, and if you have not developed a frontal lobe yet, as I simply had not, I was like, "What are we
fair.
doing, and what is
Yes.
this? And why is this famous?" And that is hard to explain to the children, especially my specific kids that are very I tend in AP Art History to have the top 10 kids, um, which are not art kids, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, sometimes they overlap, but they are very,
Right, they're
very
academic kids.
academic
Yep, yep.
and left brainy and inflexible. So they're like, "This is literally just orange." I'm like, "First of all, uh, correct, but let me explain why." And it just but also agreed,
But
right?
also
Because I stared at black canvases and was supposed to be moved,
yeah,
and I right.
right, your teacher's trying to
Ooh,
have a
and I
poignant
was like,
moment,
"What
and
is
you're like,
this?" And for me, it's like, for as much hype as this is and a cornerstone and foundational, art history character, ugh, like, why? Why? Yves Klein created an entire color, but did we that's along the same vein, right? Like, did you create it? I mean, you
yeah,
did,
yeah,
but like what? And so, that's kinda tough. Color field is kind of it it's a tough time.
fair. Okay, I will say, as soon
Sorry.
as you said Rothko, it hurt my heart a little bit because I love Rothko. No, but then
Yeah,
hearing you explain it, it makes a lot of sense.
right.
Like, if your first introduction is when you're not ready for it, and then when you're trying to teach it to other
Yes.
kids who are not
I
ready for it, I
appreciate
can
it
see
now.
where you're coming from on that.
And
I'm like,
again, the pop culture tie, I loop it
"Mhm,
in. I'm like, "Y'all, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce had it they have a Rothko book on their bookshelf, like, obviously, that's important, right? Like, and so I have to sell it. I have to really
yeah,
sell it. But that's really our shtick as teachers, I feel. We just have to sell a lot. So I
yeah,
appreciate it a
yeah,
lot more now, but I just feel like we're
absolutely."
a little on the overrated side, personally. Again, hot take.
No. No, it was a little bit of a hot take,
Yes.
but you redeemed yourself quite well, so I think that's good. Okay, and then number 3 on my list was Carl Andre. Talking about minimalists and just people I really don't like, Carl Andre is at the top of the list for me. Just his flat sculptures on the floor. He's talking about, like, geometry and squares and interacting with flat surfaces. Like, bud, you just laid some tiles on a floor. Like, it's tough for me to like, tough for me to explain. And speaking of the salaciousness part, like, his relationship with Ana Mendieta, the idea that he probably killed her. I could do a whole other podcast on that, but she's one of my all-time favorite artists, and yeah, so that makes me really dislike him even more. So this is maybe more of a personal vendetta than an artistic dislike, but it all rolls up into one for me. He's on any kind of list I have for just artists that I think are overrated, artists that I don't love to teach.
Yes.
So Carl Andre's
Funny that
number
you
3 for
mentioned
me.
murder. Because I continuing on the hot take, another hot take again, because we're now diving into like renaissance-y mastery. It again, my children will deep dive
Yeah.
anything and explaining like Caravaggio's suspiciousness and relation to, hey, just
Yes.
squished, if anyone has watched Hoppers. Uh just squish these two people casually, no big deal, but I'm an awesome painter, so anything goes. Yeah, anything goes. So, but
So
again,
I
there's
can get
so
away
many,
with it.
especially
Yeah.
now, there's so many more artists that have been discovered that are using tenebrism or chiaroscuro, like anything, right? Um, and I chose mine based off of the AP Art History curriculum,
Mhm.
because that is it's tough to explain to to the children, the students. So that's a tough one, but again, just
Fair.
the skill and the foundation, the meaning of what is there has to be appreciated. However, choices in character, a little tough for me, but, not necessarily overrated in the sense of, like, overexposed, but I think overhailed perhaps. Um,
Okay, let's
yes,
shift gears to our
yes,
underrated artists that we love maybe more than most people, or that we love and just want to share with people who maybe need to get their name
perfect.
out there a little bit more. So I'm going to have you go
Okay,
first for this list, Jen. Who's number
I
one
am
on your
really
underrated artist
into,
list?
like, a lot of non-traditional things. I feel as a medium, that painting is
Okay.
great. Okay, it is. It's lovely and wonderful, but also sometimes I think I get a little bored, and my students get a little bored with, like, just a painting and just a drawing. So if you can mix media it, I'm always gonna be a
Okay.
little bit more partial to it. Um, Hannah Frost, is I think, again, in trying to broaden my students' perspective on what you can do as an art student or as an artist, I tend to show them people that I find on social media, people that are
Mm,
working
yeah.
in maybe fields that they didn't think about, like publishing or like editorial magazines, right? Like you could do so much because I think
Okay.
when they think about being an artist, they're like, I don't want to show my stuff in a gallery. And that's all that they say. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You can do so many things. So
Right.
we're
Right.
looking at a, mixed media collage artist, so we're using photography, again, magazine clippings to kinda make these surrealist worlds, which I think is lovely, setting up photo shoots, but also what we set up
Mm,
photo shoots with looks like a paper doll cut out for clothing. It's really cool. So recently, we've kind of
yeah.
taken a dive into that and made it part of, like, our artist list when we look at mixed media and contemporary, so Hannah Frost, pretty great, I would say.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Number one on my list was Alma Thomas. I feel like everybody knows Alma Thomas already, but I would just ask people to go back and take another look at her stuff. Like, it's so vibrant and joyous. It's so colorful. I love all of her little brushstrokes. They almost look like mosaics. And, I think everybody's familiar with her. I think most elementary art teachers do an Alma Thomas type lesson, but I would really appreciate if everybody takes another look at her stuff, because I think it's so great. Such masterful use of
Yes.
color.
I
It's so
love it.
happy. It brings me so much joy, and I
Number
really appreciate
2, I
all of her
have
stuff.
Hank
Um,
Willis
all right,
Thomas.
who's number 2 on your list? He
And it
almost made
of
my
course,
list.
everything has to be kinda sort of relative to where your students are, right? I've really integrated, or tried to find, new artists, or
Yeah.
not necessarily new, but, like, more recent artists, more contemporary artists, when I talk about, like, Black History Month, or just when we talk about maybe, like, Harlem Renaissance, like, "Hey, this is where this started, and we have literally just the one piece," which, okay, that's fine. Moment of silence
Mhm.
for not having enough.
Yeah. I was gonna s
Right,
gonna say that's
but
another
this one
discussion that we could
artist
probably
that College Board
turn
has
into a
recognized, which is totally
podcast.
fine, okay, whatever.
Mm.
We can look at all of these, and I try to grow that list a little bit more. Same thing when we cover, like, Frida Kahlo, I'm like, "Yes, this is the staple in the face, but look at all of these
Mhm.
other people that are coming from." Yes, right. And so I just
Yes.
feel that Hank Willis Thomas has
There's
a
so much
great
more there. Yeah.
contemporary voice. He's plugged into maybe issues that are facing the community, but also bringing light to successes. It's not always just about the struggle, but it's also celebration of, like,
Mhm.
bodies and what we can do and where we've been. And so it
Right.
feels very robust. You can customize it, you can pick something. Um, I usually talk about him when I do, like, oh, if you want to talk about, like, current events issues, or, anything of that nature, he's like a great example of how to address that in an artistic manner that isn't necessarily in your face. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I think there's just such variety in his work, whether it's sculpture or painting or photography or whatever. And there's also variety
Right.
in, like you said, how he approaches things. Sometimes it is really in your face. Sometimes it is more subtle and
Yes.
withdrawn, and you need to think a little bit more. But there's so much depth to his work,
I
and
love it.
he addresses so many things in so many different ways that I think it's very easy to appreciate. All right, number 2 on my list was Ana Mendieta. We already talked about Carl Andre, and I just need to say Ana Mendieta is the one in that relationship who needs to be known. Like, we can put Carl Andre aside. We need to talk more about Ana Mendieta. She did an incredible job of putting her silhouette into all sorts of places. Her silhouette series is incredible. She does all sorts of nature related works, earthworks, and they're all ephemeral. They're all
Yes.
temporary in some way. And I love it
I
because
know.
some of them are temporary. They're artworks that last 6 hours until the tide comes in and washes them away. And then other times it's temporary, but on the scale of decades, where she burns her silhouette into a tree, and eventually, like, that tree bark is going to grow back over, but that is going to take decades. So again, she just does things in such interesting ways that I think more people should check her out. So I would love
Agreed,
for
agreed,
everybody
agreed.
listening to
I
go look
love
up on Anna Mendieta if you're not
I love ephemeral
familiar.
things. I love earthworks. I love site specific things that may or may not be there by the time you get there. I really enjoy uh there's something whimsy about that. Like,
Yes.
how do you know it's there unless you photograph it to keep it for longer? But if you don't, then
Hmm.
you put your stamp somewhere, somewhere. So yes, we talk a little bit about that. I love that aspect of it. Okay. Uh okay. A non-traditional, as far as, okay, where it's like, where can your art take you? Like, you guys are stuck in this box of a canvas and a paper and, like, this maybe a camera, and this is all I can do. And it's like, no, 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 let's bust out of here. I have my class in the spring, and so
Mhm.
uh and only for 14 weeks before the before this test. So we are booking it 1,000 miles an hour, but it also lines up really
That is
nicely
tight.
with anytime we have the Met Gala, and so we talk a lot about the artistry of fashion and how that's bled into
Yeah.
pop culture. And so we bring in a lot of celebrities and a lot of looks. So this, first of all, I think that's an underrated,
Mhm.
not as far as like popularity and money industry, but I think that's an underrated industry for artists specifically. Um, so that's a little twofold there, but I'm gonna say
Okay.
designer Rahul Mishra right now is doing amazing work combining uh culture, design, and artistry. And so I think what has come out recently, uh as far as uh like couture fashion, is very sculptural. It's very large. Um, we just had the Met Gala, right? Artist fashion,
Mhm.
which was lovely, by the way, not what people wore. We really, really critiqued it heavily
Yeah.
in class, but it was nice that we had um something that was real world that we picked like looks that we wanted to see based off of art history. And you know, it didn't really happen for us. We were really, saddened, but
Mhm.
that's usually the
Yeah.
case. But Rahul Mishra,
Mm.
is an Indian designer, and so when we look at that unit and we're looking at, temples and sculpture and how the body moves and the S pose in relation to that, his collections right now look like sculptures.
I was not familiar with his work, so when you said his name, I looked
Yes.
him up, and, I don't know a
Yes.
ton about fashion, but
Yes.
I love this stuff. It
Yes,
it
and a
is
couple of
so
collections ago,
sculptural, it is so
he did,
three-dimensional, and it's
like a
really nice.
Klimt-inspired collection. My goodness, like, we
I
ate
was
that
just
up in
gonna ask,
class,
I'm seeing some
and
pictures,
just
and it really looks
I mean,
like good
first of
stuff
all,
coming.
the beadwork is insane, but also there's 3D elements to it, and you are encompassed in what looks like, the glitzy version of a Klimt, and of the Kiss. It's an ode to that,
Mhm.
he's inspired by it, and, I mean, his social media work is also lovely because he really sits and explains it and talks about it. Same thing with Schiaparelli right now, like, it it's great. Tina
Mm,
Roseberry is
okay.
doing awesome work also, but the fact that I can point my students to their social media and they can hear it from the artists themselves, like, "Hey, this is what I wanted to do, and then this is how I did it, and now here is the finished work." And it
Yes.
took billions of hours and hundreds of thousands of people so that they understand the whole work, right? It doesn't just, like, spawn.
Right.
It's hard work. Um Right, real world experience or real world, who's doing it out there the best right now, and, it is quite lovely, and it helps them make those connections. And again, I have a lot of students that are from there or family is from there, they have ties to, India, so it is really lovely for them to see themselves, represented, so I wanna see more though.
I love it. Alright. Yeah. Okay, so number 3 for me, and I'm not sure how well this is gonna go over after
It's
the Rothko
good.
hate earlier, but number 3 on my list was Joan Mitchell. So, I love I love Joan Mitchell's stuff. I love her huge, colorful, abstract paintings. I think they're great. She's a wonderful abstract expressionist. I wish we talked more about her. And I think we spend far too much time on Rothko and Pollock, when
Yes.
there
Yes.
is Lee Krasner and there's Joan Mitchell and Elaine de Kooning and all of these female artists that did so many wonderful things that just get ignored. So you can use Joan Mitchell as a stand-in for any of those abstract expressionists that you should probably
Yes.
know a little bit more about.
Yeah, we talk about
But
all the
I
people, all
wanted
the women that you
to
mentioned,
get her name
specifically
out there
just,
on the list for sure.
again, give them another option to just boost their knowledge, a little bit of scaffolding, but also because they're not mentioned at all. So, um, right. And I'm like, come on, y'all. But just
Yeah,
yes. And
unfortunately.
I'm really obsessed with the size and the scale of a lot of the work. But this is different. This is different than a Rothko to me,
Yes.
personally.
Um, can I ask your opinion then on Helen Frankenthaler? Just thinking of like huge size and
Yes.
scale, but very much like color
Okay.
field type
I
things.
I
We're
I
definitely
think
leaning more
there's
on
more to
Rothko.
look
Like,
at. There's just
where do
more to look at,
you
and I
put her
think
on the
that
list?
that's where my students get stuck is that, like, you're looking at a
That's true. That's
black
true.
rectangle, and because again, I have had to learn to appreciate it, right? So now I can definitely appreciate it, and I'm like, but if you look, like, you're supposed to see layers and depth, and then, it's meant to, like, hold your attention, which it is doing inherently by talking about it. I think color field is a little easier to explain when you're looking at a Frankenthaler because there is more just physical more to look at. And you have this actual field of colors, colors, plural,
Yes. Yes.
for the most part, right? And it does engulf you a little bit more. That's how the students see it, right? Like, I'm just looking at this red and orange. But I'm like, look at the blend, look at it. The bleed. And they're just like, all right, lady, you're just hippie art at this point. And that is, to me, that's one of the harder ones to sell. So I think it's a little overhyped. Um, in that sense, but I do bring her up, Frankenthaler up. I bring up,
Yeah.
again, we talk about Yves Klein a lot, um, and just this obsession with color, a color, a color,
Hmm.
and it's also our school color. No. They're like, "No, girl." I'm like, "Okay, don't worry about it. I
That
got you, I
helps.
got you, I got you."
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I do enjoy her so much more. And again, just see highly underrated here. Highly underrated here. Yes. Yes.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad we're aligned on that one. So, okay, Jen, we've talked way too long about our favorite and least favorite artists, but I would love to wrap up with just one question about teaching AP art history. And knowing me is going to turn into like 3 questions at once, but I would love to know maybe just like your favorite and least favorite parts of teaching art history, specifically AP art history. And then also like advice you would have for somebody who's teaching it for the first time or wants to improve what they're doing with
Yeah,
AP art
I
history.
that this is literally human history. And once the students get past the art aspect of it, that this is just human history, right? Um, they still have to know the history of what's happening at that time period. And
Hmm.
then they can see the connections of how art has been impacted by what's happening in the world and vice versa. Um, and how in tune artists are. That's always my favorite part because we are also record keepers. And so that is something that captures their attention and they understand a lot of that.
Yes.
Images that they've seen of history are actually artists paintings or artist pieces. And so I'm like, all of those illustrations, all of the things, all of the paintings that you've seen, that they belong to an artist. So you've been exposed to art history from the get-go. The Ninja Turtles are named after the Renaissance masters. So what are you saying? Like, art history is everywhere. So that's definitely my
Hmm.
favorite part. I think my least favorite part is explaining
It
how
is
they're going to have to explain themselves on this test, because we can get carried away and we can yap and we can really go in depth, but then at the end of the day, they have to
yeah.
cater their opinions and their knowledge to a rubric, so that's definitely the hardest part, but, once we go over the rubric, which is my suggestion, if you just, like, use the resources that have been given to
Yes.
us via, AP Classroom or whatnot, I pick the test questions off of their test banks, it becomes a lot more streamlined. I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel by any means. If there's a question bank, I'm using questions from the question
Mhm.
bank, especially because that's how they're gonna be formatted and worded on the exam, and so I'm just trying to set up my students for success, but it is definitely
Yeah,
the hardest, when you're looking at the free response
exactly.
questions or FRQs of how do you get them writing about art history without being like, "And this guy Caravaggio unalived 2 people." Okay, and that's not okay. Or, same thing with Jeff Koons. So, trying to get them to academically talk about it in a way that fulfills the AP requirements is the hardest part, but they get over it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think there's the challenge there because you have these hooks that
Right.
really get them into the story. They have those things
Right.
that are remembered, but that's not necessarily
Yeah.
what is being looked for by the people grading the exam. So, yeah, you do have to make that
Yes.
shift, make that transition. So, all right, well, Jen, thank you so much for being a hater with me,
Of
but also
course.
sharing the things that we
Yeah, thank
love
you.
and sharing some of your advice for AP Art History. We appreciate all of it. So, it's been fun talking to you. Thank you. That will do it for us today. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Jenn for joining me and being willing to share not only her classroom wisdom, but her very honest art history opinions. And they hurt my feelings a little bit, but it still makes for good discussion. But honestly, one of the things that I love about this conversation is just the teaching art history does not require us to love every artist or pretend that we love every artist or every art movement equally. We can always acknowledge the importance of an artist, explain the context, the history, and still be honest about where we make those connections and where we don't. And I think that when we are honest about our own opinions and we share what we think about artists, that can give permission to students to look a little more closely, question things, disagree, and kind of develop their own perspective. So I think that is something that's really worthwhile. But all in all, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it gives you some things to think about and maybe brings you a little more joy as you dive into teaching art history this year. We are so glad you joined us for today's episode, and we hope it was helpful for you. If you know someone else who might be helped with the information in this show, we would love for you to share it with them. We also appreciate all the ratings and reviews that listeners leave for us, so if you have a few seconds to give us a 5-star rating or even leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen, we would love to see it. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next week.